Ms. Wilson, you may proceed.
Defense calls Dr. Jeffrey Colino.
Good morning. Would you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you give to be the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. Ms. Wilson?
So I'll set myself up.
That's fine.
Would you state your full name, please, and spell your last name?
Sure. Jeffrey William Colino, last name Colino.
Where are you employed?
Neuroscience Practice Institute.
In what capacity are you employed there?
As a
With the air conditioning back here, I can hear.
Sir, you can get a little closer.
Sure. As a forensic neurologist.
That's fine.
And Dr. Colino, where did you get your undergraduate education?
Undergraduate was a mix of a lot of different places, but Vassar College, Oxford University, George Washington University, University District of Columbia, Berkeley, UC Berkeley, all over the place.
Where did you get your medical degree?
University of California, Davis.
Where did you do your internship?
Jackson Memorial Hospital, VA Systems in Miami.
And what about your residency?
Same.
Okay. Doctor, do you specialize in neurology?
Yes.
Would you explain for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what neurology is?
Sure. Neurology is the practice of medicine of the nervous system. The brain is the central nervous system with the spinal cord. Then we have a peripheral nervous system, the nerves in the arms and legs and throughout the body. So neurology is the study of, diagnosis, and treatment of disorders of the nervous system.
And does that also include trauma to various parts of the nervous system?
Yes, it does.
And you may need to lean forward just a
Sure.
little bit again. Have you previously been qualified to testify as an expert in the field of neurology?
Yes.
Do you recall that the defense team retained you to examine Donald Hartung, correct?
Correct.
Do you recall when that was that the defense team retained you?
The date of first contact, I don't recall. I know the date that I evaluated him. So it was probably, I saw him on July 31st. I would imagine date of contact was a month or so prior to that.
And do you bill for your time working on this case?
I do.
Who pays you for your time on this case?
The Justice Administrative Commission, the state,
What is your hourly rate?
it's $400 an hour.
And up to this point, how many hours have you billed?
A little over 100 billed so far.
Have you personally met with Mr. Hartung as part of your work on this case?
Yes.
Do you recall when that was?
That's July 31st, from 9 a.m. to 2, a little after 2 in the afternoon,
Where was that meeting?
at the detention center.
And you said that it was 9 to 2, so it was approximately 5 hours.
Correct.
During that meeting, what did you do?
A comprehensive neurological history and physical.
What's involved in that comprehensive exam and physical?
Well, the history is asking lots of questions, but a neurologic physical exam, so let me start with history. So history can include incidents of head trauma, substance abuse, can be injuries around birth, it can be infections of the nervous system, diseases of the nervous system, asking lots of questions. What's happened to you, either medically, through accidents, toxic exposures, things that happened Development is very important for the nervous system, so things that could happen either before birth, shortly after birth, all those fall under history. And then family history as well. The neurologic exam starts with mental status, then goes to cranial nerves, which are the nerves that control parts of the face. So cranial nerves control eyes, ears, mouth, smelling, all of basically the nerves of the face, so they're cranial nerves. Then we go on to motor function, so strength of various muscle groups in the arms and legs, sensory function throughout the body, arms, legs, face, trunk, etc., coordination, reflexes, gait, stance, and then cerebellar function, and that kind of thing.
Okay. Is there a standard format for a neurologic exam?
There is. It is basically mental status. There's a sequence of this. Mental status, cranial nerves, motor, then typically reflexes, then sensation, then coordination, then gait, stance, and that kind of thing, and cerebellar function.
Did you follow that standard format?
Yes.
And you said a moment ago that you also did mental status testing?
Exactly.
Okay. Did you order an MRI on Mr. Hartung?
I did.
And was there already a PET scan when you came onto the case?
There was.
Okay. Did you receive any materials from the defense team to review?
I did.
What materials did you receive?
I received the report on the PET scan. I received the following. I received the Escambia County Sheriff's Office offense report. I received a number of documents pertaining to Richard Smith, John Smith, and Mrs. Smith. And then I received the interviews, both July 31st and August 1st of 2015, both as a transcript and as the audiovisual source material as well.
And did you review those materials that you received?
I did.
Did you use those documents and records in formulating your opinions in this case?
In formulating, I would reply with they would have influenced somewhat my ultimate diagnosis, but before I had any of that material, I was diagnosing him with a neurodegenerative disorder. So I can say it influenced perhaps, but it did not change the ultimate category of diagnosis. And I had documented same in email correspondence about my diagnosis before I received any of that material.
Okay. Does an MRI image have to be interpreted?
There's two ways. Yes and no. Strictly, it should be, but there's a couple ways we can look at interpreting MRI. The general way that any imaging study, whether it's a chest X-ray because you might have pneumonia, or an MRI because you might have a brain tumor. The standard way is a radiologist or other expert with experience. Like I've looked at a lot of MRIs, so I can qualify as a MRI expert. You look at it and it's qualitative, which is another way of saying strictly subjective. You don't think of it that way, but when you go and get a chest X-ray, it's just a radiologist's opinion as to, is that normal, is that not normal, does it look like pneumonia, does it look like heart failure? So the answer to your question is the MRI is interpreted, in this case, two ways. Qualitatively or subjectively, the conventional way of looking at an MRI, referencing your experience database and saying normal, abnormal, and in what ways, if so, abnormal. And then there's the NeuroQuant analysis, which is a completely objective, algorithm-based, quantitative, as opposed to qualitative analysis. And so we did both. We did the completely objective, no human involvement analysis, and we did the qualitative, which was me reading the MRI.
Okay. So with NeuroQuant, that was the method that you used for the objective interpretation.
Exactly.
And can you explain just a little bit more about how NeuroQuant
Sure.
works?
So there are certain disorders that the naked eye, that conventional interpretations are not sensitive enough to catch. So NeuroQuant has been around for, I'm bad at dates, but it's been around for roughly at least 10, if not more, 15, 20 years. And what it is a set of special MRI sequences, not meant to be looked at by the naked eye, but meant to be put through this software. And these sequences then connect to a database. And the database looks at the images of an individual, like Mr. Hartung, and compares it to a matched population for age, gender, ethnicity, and skull size. So you have a normal population, the complex algorithms, which are way beyond my level of statistics and such, but they run and then they come out, they generate a report. With no human involvement, that gives a volumetric, meaning a percentage volume comparison of patient X or Mr. Hartung to the age, gender, ethnicity, and skull size matched normal population.
So with NeuroQuant, make sure I understand this, everyone who uses the same software would get the same results for any given image. Is that fair to say?
It's 100% fair to say. That's what makes it so objective. It does not matter whether I upload it, whether another person uploads it, whether the facility directly uploads it. The data is the data, and you can't do anything about it. It's impartial.
Okay. And does NeuroQuant also have comparisons as far as from that particular image and then to a normative database?
That's how it works, yes.
Okay. So let's talk for a moment about your qualitative interpretation. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
And let me ask you if you recognize this.
I sure do.
And is it a true and accurate representation of the subject matter?
Yes, it is.
Judge, I would move to admit Defendant's Exhibit 1.
Any objection?
I didn't hear what it was.
It's,
You can.
Dr. Colino, if you could explain what this Defendant's Exhibit 1 is, please.
These are 4 excerpt sequences taken from the qualitative or subjective MRI to show just what I'll call global atrophy, and explain what I mean in a second. But they're excerpts from, not doctored anyway, just pulled straight out of the sequences and made into a PDF for demonstrative purposes.
Those are of Mr. Hartung. Are those of Mr. Hartung?
Are they of Mr. Hartung?
These are of Mr. Hartung, correct?
Yes.
No objection.
And permission to publish.
So admitted, you may publish.
And I can have just a moment. I know we always have a difficult time finding a spot for an easel, so Dr. Colino, if you can.
Just make it visible to the jury, and I don't need to really come down there. I can speak from here.
Can all members of the jury view it, or does it need to be changed a little bit of angle? I think you probably need to turn it a little bit more towards the jury. And you're welcome to assist, Doctor.
Any help is appreciated.
Is that better for the jury? Anybody raise your hand if you can't see? And also, if any member of the jury needs to like move around or stand up, you can do that too.
We have all these technical challenges here.
All right?
Okay. Dr. Colino, this is your qualitative interpretation of Mr. Hartung's MRI, is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Can you explain to the jury exactly what they are looking at here?
So you're looking at different cross sections through the brain, and what we want to talk about here is both what we see and what we don't see. I might just walk over there. So,
That's fine.
so these spaces here, these black voids here, here, and that's very common here. That's normal. That looks like a hole. That's just a blood vessel on it. So what we see is really remarkable atrophy. So these spaces, the brain should be really much, much closer to the skull. And those should be what are called potential spaces, not actualized spaces. So we see severe atrophy, but what is kind of most remarkable is we don't see any of what you would call vascular insults. So there's no, the atrophy is just there without any other findings. So in other words, in a lot of people in their 60s, especially with a strong smoking history, you'd expect to find, we have lots of ways of saying the same thing in medicine, but they're called periventricular white matter changes, demyelinating changes of the white matter. There's a lot of non-specific white matter change terms. He has none of that. So there's no sign of this being related to vascular disease, to drug use, because that always shows up in these regions around the ventricles. Because the blood vessels here are so tiny that the ones that are most sensitive to high blood pressure, high blood sugar, high cholesterol, and to trauma. And there's other portions of the brain that are also uniquely susceptible to trauma. And Mr. Hartung had given me a significant history of trauma, so I kind of expected to see what we call the sequelae or consequences of trauma. But I don't. So what I really see is, on the qualitative, simply severe atrophy with no other findings. So no subcortical, below the cortex is the outer, the top part of the brain. If I grab my little model over here. And this kind of helps because it shows blood vessels. But, we see from the top, blood vessels are big. I'm going to flip it over and start opening up. Blood vessels get much, much smaller. So the general rule in medicine, or the flat out fact of life in neurology, those things that have a metabolic or systemic origin, high blood pressure, diabetes, high cholesterol, substances of abuse, they show up most in the small blood vessels. So you see that around the ventricles, but we don't see that here. And then trauma, typically because of the way that the brain sits in the bony skull very hard, bone, brain not so much. Brain tissue is pretty soft. With head trauma, even without the head, let's say it's a car accident, even if the head doesn't hit something, but you've heard about whiplash, there's what can be called coup contre coup. So the soft, gooey brain hits certain spots. So when there's trauma, the two places we find the most consequence are those places where there's no leeway for brain. So these are called, this is the temporal lobe on both sides. So the temporal poles are jammed in right like that. So we expect to see damage and then subsequent shrinkage, because that's what the brain does when it gets hurt. After 17 or 18 years of age, every injury basically has one outcome: atrophy, shrinkage. Things are different when you're still developing. But for trauma, the tips of the temporal lobes in the very front of the frontal lobes begin to kind of make sense. They show up as indicators of a traumatic cause of something. So we see here severe, diffuse, meaning all over, atrophy with no signs of a metabolic or systemic problem like high blood pressure, diabetes, high cholesterol, or even heavy smoking. I don't even see the footprints of smoking despite the heavy smoking history. And we see no signs of trauma.
And Doctor, would it aid your testimony any to have some images of a normal brain scan as a way to compare
Thank you.
Mr. Hartung's scans?
We can, but I think for a normative, we could just jump to the NeuroQuant,
Okay.
because that's just so factual, objective. If you have a blown up already, I can show the jury. That's fine.
Okay, I have to get there first.
Okay, whatever works for you guys.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
I'm showing you what's been marked as Defendant's Exhibit 2. Do you recognize this?
I do.
And can you explain what this is?
Okay, so this
And
is...
before you go into it, just,
Yes, I can.
is it the triage brain atrophy report
Yes,
that
it is.
NeuroQuant? And is this a true and accurate representation?
Looks exactly like the one I've got right here, so I'll say yes, down to the numbers. Perfect.
Okay. We've moved to admit Defendant's Exhibit 2.
No objection.
So admitted.
Permission to publish.
You may. And just to remind counsel, we're going to be taking our lunch break in about 4 or 5 minutes.
Perhaps this would be a good place to stop before
Okay.
we start on to this new
Or you want
image.
to publish after lunch then?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then the jury, first I want to apologize. It was my oversight that you only had the choice you had today for lunch. Tomorrow you would have a better choice, Seville or wherever. So I apologize. We'll have that better option tomorrow. So we'll go ahead and take a lunch break. Y'all want till 1:30 or how long?
1:30.
All right, we'll be in recess until 1:30.